Buy a boat, they said. It'll be all sunshine and rainbows and good times. Well, that's just not always the case, as will be seen in this upcoming video. Welcome back, guys, to this week's episode of Boating News of the Week. Our first story to make the boating news this week is going to take us over to California, where 14 people this past week had to be rescued off the coast of Newport Beach. The Orange County Sheriff's Department's Harbor Patrol received a call that a boat was taking on water just outside the entrance of the harbor around 2:45 this past Sunday. Authorities were dispatched, but by the time deputies arrived, a Good Samaritan vessel had already begun to tow the boat. Unfortunately, also by the time they arrived, this vessel was almost all the way submerged. Here, the passengers on board the sinking vessel can all be seen jumping into choppy waters as rescue boats arrived. The boaters were all saved by Harbor Patrol, Newport Beach lifeguards, and a Good Samaritan vessel. This vessel does wind up eventually sinking in about 100 foot of water about a quarter mile outside the harbor entrance. One of the more impressive parts of this scene, though, is almost everybody you see here is wearing a life jacket. It's always kind of crazy to me how many times we see these situations arise and nobody's in the water with a life jacket on. This means that somebody on this ship was able to stay calm and collected enough in this emergency situation to make sure to get everybody squared away before they decided to start getting into the water. Fortunately, with this Good Samaritan vessel here, everybody was recovered safely and no injuries were reported other than the vessel, of course. Our next item to make the boating news this week is actually going to be a follow-up story to a story we did last week, where we were talking about this Dutch freighter that had to abandon ship once cargo broke free and the ship began to list. As you can see in those first images, there was a green vessel on board the ship that was being transported. In these images, that vessel is gone. That vessel had broke free. Most of us thought that vessel was lost to the ocean, but that turns out to not be the case. As can be seen in these images right here, this vessel was located a few miles away from the scene by a salvage company. Unfortunately, it did take a few days before the salvage company could actually try and tie lines to this vessel. Due to the high seas, they had to wait for everything to calm down, but they actually were able to recover this vessel and get it back into shore, which is still quite the surprise, as most figured this vessel was lost to the sea after it fell off the ship. Our next incident to make the boating news this week is going to take us over to Thailand, where these images will show residents fleeing as a large cargo ship lost control and crashed into 4 riverside houses just outside of Bangkok a little bit over a week ago. 2 of these houses were severely damaged, but nobody was injured or killed in the incident. The Vietnamese captain who was at the helm of the 78-meter ship told investigators that the engine stopped working after a power outage, which caused him to lose control of the rudder as they were trying to navigate the vessel down the river. The ship's anchor was released to prevent the ship from going any further downriver at this time. This vessel was eventually able to get off the riverbank under its own power. The ship had left Bangkok port after unloading cargo from Singapore and was on its way to return to Singapore when the accident occurred. A local resident actually talked to news reporters and said that if the anchor had not been dropped, that this vessel likely would have also crashed into a home that was housing several disabled people and would have likely caused a major disaster. But fortunately, everybody was okay in this one and the ship went back underway. Our next incident to make the boating news this week is going to take us over to Australia, where this was the scene on the Calliope River when authorities received a call from residents that an unmanned tinnie was on the loose in the river spinning donuts. Authorities were dispatched to go out and try and stop the tinnie, and with a little luck, one of the officers was able to leap on board and disable the vessel. After the vessel stopped, the search begins for the 73-year-old male who was supposed to be inside the vessel. Fortunately, he was recovered from the water by a Good Samaritan vessel and several kayakers in the area. The gentleman did tell authorities a larger boat came by, throwing a massive wake that tossed him from the tinnie, letting it go rogue. Our next incident to make the boating news this week is going to take us over to New Zealand, where Lewis and Alyssa Allen were sailing through Bream Bay when they heard a mayday call come over the radio. Knowing they were only a few kilometers out and the only vessel nearby, the couple broke into action to go respond to the mayday call. When the couple arrived at the scene, they found a man holding onto a jet ski who was barely conscious. He had apparently been in the water for over 2 hours at this point. Due to the rough sea conditions, the couple's not able to get their catamaran close enough to the jet ski to be able to pull the gentleman on board. So the couple takes a different approach, and with Lewis behind the helm, they pull the catamaran as close as they can to the jet ski, and Alyssa dives in to save the gentleman. Lucky for him, they were in the area. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode of Boating News of the Week. If you ever see anything crazy happening on your waterways, be sure to hit me up on Facebook or Instagram and let me know, and you might see your stories over here. Just like OJ3, Picasso West, John Booth, Jace Mack, and Michelle Gile did this week. And if you haven't already, guys, go ahead and drop an anchor on the subscribe button here. If not, we're coming to steal your drain plug.